Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's edition of Alaska Weather, Monday, September 28th, 2020. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, no watches, warnings, or advisories around the state for the next 24 hours or so. Storms moved off into Canada now. They hit the Panhandle yesterday, and winds coming down and conditions improving all across the southeast coast, even up in the northern areas and eastern North Gulf Coast. Still a little breezy, though, in some areas. Gulf Canada, for example, seen gusts, or the Copper River Basin up the Copper River there, 30 to 40 miles an hour this afternoon. And the 45 to 50 mile an hour winds earlier today reported at Skagway and the Klondike Highway, Northern Link Canal. Those have coming down to about 25 to 30 this afternoon. You can see the frontal boundary there is kind of stalled out south of the Panhandle with right across the Queen Charlotte Islands, but there's still good southwest flow pulling moisture in. High pressure developing too. You can see some clearing and lighter winds. Barely see some clearing there just west of Prince of Wales Island and working inland. And more showers extend all the way back to the North Gulf Coast, with moisture coming up in the south and then southeast wind flow, and that was good enough for about half an inch of rain to fall today at Valdez and Cordova, and about 2/10 of an inch fell at Port Muller, but only 2/100 of an inch at Kodiak. Some good clearing there over the central and western interior today for some afternoon sunshine. Otherwise, the Arctic coast saw some flurries or light snow flurries, snow showers. A little bit of fog on the east side, not bad on the west side, though. A little bit of an offshore flow there kept the ceilings visibilities higher. May have even been some spotty clearing there as well, like there was into the northern Bering Sea around St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, weak low pressure there in northeast Bristol Bay, just bringing some light amounts of precipitation there. Like, let's see, Cold Bay and Port Hayden at about 1/4 of an inch of precipitation, and then maybe 1/10 of an inch up toward King Salmon or just off to their east. And showers, rain, and drizzle scattered around the southeast Bering Sea from the Pribilof Islands, although St. Paul only picked up 1/100 of an inch of precipitation, so that area of moisture is on the lights, really light there, down into the Alaska Peninsula. But Cold Bay, upslope conditions there as the north and northwest winds came in with the moisture. They had about 1/4 of an inch of rain, as did Port Hayden. Farther to the west, higher pressure building in over the central Aleutians. Light winds there with basically dry conditions. Next front pushing rain into Chimay-Attu with increasing winds. And for tonight, that whole mess out there, that system in the front, will just slide southeastward and weaken, actually. So occasional light rain chances there for the western Aleutians, and a chance of showers for Atka. Chance of clearing for Adak there with high pressure just to your north over the southern Bering Sea. And the flow really getting weak now coming down from the north, so the winds continue to diminish for the Alaska Peninsula and the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, but still a chance of some light shower activity at times across those areas. Stay dry over the northern Bering Sea and mostly fair over the interior. Got the weak trough there weakening as it continues to push northward. We're kind of rotating up into the upper Tanana Valley 40 mile country for a chance of rain or snow showers, depending on your elevation and time. And mostly just showery conditions down the Alaska Range. And leftover moisture keeps periods of light rain in over Prince William Sound to Passage Canal, maybe Portage on down toward Seward and over into Kamishak Bay. Otherwise, the Panhandle continues to dry out. Warm front moisture pushing across the Queen Charlotte Island should stay in Dixon Entrance through tonight, and then it'll kind of shift northward tomorrow. That system out there, the Triple Point Front, kind of rotating north and already pulling back to the northwest. And so even though the dry spell won't last too long, you're back into the rain for the southeast coast tomorrow, it won't last much longer than that because the whole system will pull off to the northwest, and so we'll see increasing wind and precipitation. Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula up into the North Gulf Coast. Strongest winds will be on the western North Gulf Coast. Otherwise, scattered showers along the Alaska Peninsula from, say, Denali and Healy on down into Togiak Bay, cutting across the southern Kuskokwim Valley, and generally cloudy and dry with light winds over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Clearing, though, south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, and also up over the interior once again. And the snow shower chances are so negligible on the Arctic coast, not even worth mentioning. High pressure over the southwest Bering Sea, light winds and dry conditions there, maybe some sun again from AKwx westward. And taking a look at the forecast for Wednesday, that low center pulls northwestward now, cuts just south of Kodiak Island, so they'll be in the gale and storm force wind zone there, as well as the western North Gulf Coast, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay. Pretty good increase in the winds for southern Cook Inlet as well. And Panhandle, though, the pulling back to the northwest, that kind of holds the front off the coast there, and just a chance of some light rain showing up along the coastline of Prince of Wales Island. Otherwise, maybe a partly cloudy or partly to mostly type of day there with light winds. But winds will be on the increase. You can see a tighter gradient over the central interior, and that looks good for anywhere from 20 to gust 35 miles an hour, especially the higher elevations like Indian Mountain. They kind of turn northeasterly. That's going offshore flow will make for some clearing right out into the northern Bering Sea and the western Arctic coast. And it stays pretty damp with an increase in the northwest winds again over the central and eastern Aleutians, with periods of rain or showers riding in on those winds. And for the lows tonight, mid to upper 20s for the Brooks Range, North Slope, Arctic coast, and upper 20s to lower 30s over the central interior, to actually near 40 at Delta Junction for the low. And south of the Alaska Range, mostly in the 40s. Some areas will drop into the 30s there, depending on your elevation, like Copper River Basin, and 40s to near 50 for the Panhandle for the lows. Mid to upper 30s central Aleutians, and lower to mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Highs for tomorrow, 50s mid to upper for the southeast coast, and 50s lower 50s for southern Alaska. Tanana Valley, 50 to 55 for the highs over toward the border there, and mid to upper 30s for the Brooks Range, and lower 30s now for the Arctic coast and North Slope, with lower 40s for the Kotzebue Sound area into the northern Bering Sea. And then lows Wednesday morning shaping up like this again, down to near 20 in the Brooks Range, and maybe some teens over the North Slope, and otherwise out toward the coastline though, upper 20s, mid to upper 20s to near 30 along much of the area, to mid 30s along the northwest coast into the St. Lawrence Island area. Shade under 40 for the Pribilof, same for the Adak-Atka area, mid 40s for the far western Aleutians, lower to mid 40s there for the Alaska Peninsula, as well as much of south central Alaska, upper 40s Kodiak Island, 45 to 50, kind of mild there for the Panhandle for the low temperatures, and the highs recovering pretty nice there. That building upper level ridge and that front kind of holding off to the west there, bringing some warmer air up and maybe some clearing. So lower to mid 60s definitely likely there for the southern southeast coast, a little cooler up to the north, 55 to 62. And mid to upper 50s for southern Alaska and the Tanana Valley, mid 50s around Fairbanks, upper 30s for the Brooks Range, and 30 to 35 out along the Arctic coast, out in the Bering Sea, 40s, mid to upper 40s there for the Pribilofs and the Aleutians, and lower 40s St. Lawrence Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather for Tuesday morning, IFR, central North Slope and the Arctic coast, actually from about Point Lay on eastward to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Marginal VFR, say from Anatuvik, Adigan area. Actually, they're right on the edge of the IFR. Arctic Village in the marginal VFR, and then just south of the mountains, though, VFR, Yukon River there, Porcupine Yukon River, right on down, all the way out to the Delta. And Kuskokwim Valley, kind of marginal. Western Cook Inlet and the Alaska Range, sort of IFR to marginal. And for the Copper River Basin, some IFR, marginal VFR, and VFR. Cook Inlet, VFR, Kenai Peninsula, marginal. Northern and southern Panhandle there, marginal, but the central area is pretty good zone there of VFR, as well as Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, Adak and Atka. And for the afternoon, we'll see that we've got, let's see, get that going again. There we go. Tuesday afternoon, IFR along the Arctic coast, marginal VFR over a portion of the North Slope and central interior. Now we've got marginal VFR replacing the IFR there from the western upper Yukon Valley, Koyukuk Valley there on down the river, and even the Kuskokwim River Valley there out to the Delta. Eastern Bering Sea, marginal VFR northward to the Bering Strait, but some pretty good VFR farther to the west from Adak all the way out to Shemya. And Bristol Bay holding VFR as well as part of the Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island becoming marginal with the approach of that next system coming up from the south there. So deterioration of conditions throughout the day, but should stay. The IFR should hold off until evening, and the southeast coast, same thing, becoming marginal over a good portion of the area with the IFR holding off to the west. And then for Wednesday, that actually backs off some. You can see it becomes, the marginal VFR pushes off the coast of the Panhandle, kind of lingers in the Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area, southeast interior Copper River Basin, marginal, and the Kenai Peninsula from Montague Island there, from maybe Passage Canal on down the south side, across Port Moller into Kamishak Bay, Kodiak Island, all IFR. And VFR, Northern Cook Inlet, actually Knik Arm, and the maybe part of the Matanuska Valley, and definitely the Susitna Valley. Good conditions over the interior, IFR North Slope and Arctic Coast, marginal VFR out west. And then for the afternoon, IFR across the Arctic Coast and North Slope, more extensive IFR, and the Western Aleutians, another system pushing some IFR in for Shimi and Attu, but the Bering Sea, Aleutians mostly marginal VFR, IFR north side of the Alaska Peninsula, and up into southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay area, and the just east of the Western Alaska Range, and IFR for the Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast area, marginal for the Panhandle. And for Anaktuvik and Adigan, both could start be on the edge of the IFR zone early on and then becoming marginal VFR. Any luck, maybe VFR in the afternoon. Lake Clark-Camaro will be VFR tomorrow and into the afternoon. Same for rainy, either approach. VFR conditions forecast, windy VFR, north and south entrance. And through the pass for Isabel, same forecast, VFR. Mintasta VFR and Tanita VFR, as well as Portage looking really good tomorrow. And Chilcoot and White become VFR. Freezing levels, about 4,000 feet central southern Alaska there into the Yakutat area and Bristol Bay, and then 2,000 feet or less to the surface from the Brooks Range north to the Arctic coast and the Seward Peninsula. Pretty good gradient there with the jet cutting in across southern Panhandle, 4 to 14,000 feet there. And for icing, next big system coming up, bringing a lot of moisture up from the south there. And we've got quite a zone of considerable moderate rime icing that won't reach the, won't make landfall before tomorrow evening, but gets quite close there to Kodiak Island and pushes in toward the southeast coast. And otherwise, you've got light to isolated moderate rime icing over about the southern 3/4 of the Panhandle, and then also some icing threats of a mixed variety for the Alaska Peninsula out to about Atka, but that's not too significant. And for the jet stream, again, strong jet, the next storm there south of the Alaska Peninsula, you can just barely see it on the chart there. Good southerly winds with that about 140 knots, and they take a turn to the east across the Gulf of Alaska into the northern Panhandle, about 135, increasing to 170 knots there in the Yukon. Otherwise, a northerly 70 to 75 out over the Bering Sea, 3,000 or 9,000 feet, 50 to 60 knots into the Panhandle, lighter over the west, and there's the winds with the next system coming up for Tuesday at 3,000 feet. And turbulence-wise, look for some moderate chop central southeast coast and Kodiak Island.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission, GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. GOLD connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, the salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, a little closer into the barrier islands there in the extreme eastern Arctic coast, or in closer to the east side there than it was, say, 5, 6, 7 days ago, noticeably so. But not much change farther to the northwest there, and not a lot of big changes expected over the next 4 or 5 days. Taking a look at the coastal water forecast, we've got small craft advisories on the south coast for southeast winds 25 to 30 knots with 11 to 12 foot seas. North coast, small craft advisories, east winds 25 to 30 knots with 12 foot seas. And southeast 15 though for Clarence Strait, south 10 Stevens Passage, northerlies at 15 for Lynn Canal. And then on Wednesday, that front's still close enough and hanging together well enough there to produce minimum gales on the south coast at 35 knots from the south, and then they come around to the southeast at 30 knots on the central coast, going east at 30 knots on the north coast, and then kind of back around to the south there toward Yakutat and back to east at 40 knots to the eastern North Gulf Coast. Inside waters, southerlies 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 feet. Prince William Sound, northern Cook Inlet, northeast breeze tomorrow at 15 knots with 2 to 5 foot seas. Small craft advisories for the western North Gulf Coast, east 25 on the western zones, northeast at 30 knots, and gales for the Barren Islands, 35 knots out of the east, 9 foot seas, and 10 foot seas with 30 knot winds for Kamishak Bay, southern Cook Inlet, northeast at 20. And for Wednesday, big increase in the winds. We got storm warnings out for southern Cook Inlet. Northeast sustained 50 knots, 23 foot seas. Northeast also 50 knots for Kamishak Bay. East 50 knots for the Barren Islands. And north of the Forelands, northern Cook Inlet, gale warnings. North 35 knots with 14 foot seas. And for the North Gulf Coast, full gales. East 40 to 45 knots with 20 foot seas. And small craft advisories in Prince William Sound for east winds at 25. Kodiak Island tomorrow, gale warnings, strongest on the east side of the island there, 45 knots out of the northeast with 12 foot seas. Shelikof Strait, minimum gales at 35 knots, and then 40 knot winds, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, and northeast 20 to 30 knots, strongest on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay east at 20. And for Wednesday for Bristol Bay, northeast at 45 knots, just under storm force there, and also from Cape Sarachef to Castle Cape, northerlies 45 knots, 20 foot seas, and north 40 knots on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, and really howling down Shelikof Strait, northeast 45 knots with 18 foot seas, otherwise east side of Kodiak, east at 30. Fox Islands tomorrow, northerlies 20 to 25 knots with 5 to 7 foot seas. Adak and Atka, north to northeast at 15 knots, 4 to 5 foot seas, and 20 knot winds from Chitka. Small craft advisories, east 25. That's system sliding by to your south there for the western Aleutians. And then Wednesday, southwest 15 for the western Aleutians, Amchitka west at 20, and small craft advisories, Adak and Atka, northwest 25 knots with 9-foot seas. And for Unimak Island, northwest 25 to 30 knots, and Unalaska Island, gales 30 to 40 knot winds out of the northwest. Southwest coast, north 10 to 15 tomorrow, north 15 for the Pribilofs, northwest 15 St. Matthew Island. St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, light northeast drift at 5 to 10 knots. For Wednesday, northeast 30 knots, picks up quite a bit up there. Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, gale warnings for the southwest coast there at 35 knots from the north, seas up to 10 feet. Small craft advisories for the Pribilofs and St. Matthew Island for 6 to 8 foot seas, along with 25 knot sustained winds. And for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, pretty light in the winds tomorrow, east-northeast at 10, 2 to 3 foot seas, 15 knots on the central and west side all the way down to Cape Thompson from the east with 3 to 4 foot seas, and then southeast 10 down to Wales. And those will turn northeast, pick up a little bit, not too bad though, 20 knots there, Wales to Cape Thompson. Then easterly winds, 20 knots, central and west coast, and small craft advisories on the east side there, east 25 knots with 5 foot seas. For tonight again, continued improvement over the panhandle. Showers lingering, but generally ending toward morning there, but light rain showers continue the North Gulf Coast. Areas of southern and south central Alaska and out west there, kind of unsettled conditions continue, but winds will be light. And the outlook for tomorrow, not bad over the interior. We've got a weak trough bringing a chance of showers in from northern Bristol Bay, Togiak Bay, Dillingham, right up into the Denali Park area. Otherwise, not too bad for the North Gulf Coast, and periods of rain increase over the panhandle just to pull back to the west with gale and storm force winds.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.